Welcome to another episode of Teen Minds Redefined. And I just want to take a second first to thank you, all the listeners. We are celebrating 6 months. We are celebrating 26 episodes, not missing a week. This is my jam. This is the most amazing thing I think I've ever done. And the reason it is because we are making an impact on parents, an impact on teachers, an impact on kids, and the relationships. And my mission is for parents to never have to say, oh my God, I hate the teenage years. I can't wait to get them the hell out of my house. That needs to stop because teens are amazing and we need to help you reimagine those relationships. So having said that, YouTube, subscribe to the podcast, Spotify, Apple, Good Pods. I'm everywhere. So not only subscribe, not only follow, but share, because you just never know who needs to hear this stuff. And it's good stuff. So thank you. And I'm also celebrating today my very first return guest within 6 months, Dr. Mueller, the sequel.
Awesome.
So we are getting ready to unlock the secrets of your personality and improve your emotional intelligence because we have Dr. Alan Mueller in the house as the brains behind Adaptive Challenge Consulting. He is on a mission to help you understand yourself, your teen, and your relationship with your teen. Welcome, Dr. Alan Mueller. Again.
It's so great to be back. I'm so glad to be here. And what a great introduction. Thank you.
My pleasure. Got to do you good. Okay, let's go. What is your story and why is it your story? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, so my story is one of sort of lots of instructive failures, lots of bumps in the road. And I think a lot of our stories are like that. One thing I share with people is that when I went to college the first time, it took me 7 years to finish. And my GPA was 2.16. So a lot of my friends graduated magna cum laude and summa cum laude. I just graduated thank the laude. Can't believe he even made it. I was working 2 jobs, sometimes 3 jobs. But there've been I've had a lot of amazing failures. But along the way, I've also worked in a lot of different areas, and I'm raising 2 children, both of whom are teenagers right now. I'm thankfully married to a school counselor, so she has a lot of expertise in sort of the birth through young adolescence. And then I studied college student psychology, so I have a lot of experience sort of older adolescents through young adulthood. And so I'm a Myers-Briggs certified interpreter, and I use the Myers-Briggs in a lot of my work, but I also use it interpersonally at home. I use it with my children. My 9th grader talks type, as we call it in the Myers-Briggs world. He talks type, and so does my older son who's in college. And so the ability to, understand our personality types better helps us be better parents to our kids, helps our kids be better kids, helps us be better partners and spouses along the co-parenting journey, if that's part of your equation. And then also great coworker and great supervisor and all those other things as well. And so one of my missions is to take this older tool, the Myers-Briggs, and give it a refresh and make it fun so that we can have those aha moments to build more empathy. Because at the end of the day, the more empathy and grace we can give other people, the better. And there's a world of how we are wired differently that is in the way of empathy sometimes. And my job is to help demystify that. So, yeah, that's what I'm here to do.
I love it. Okay, Myers-Briggs. So there's 752, not exaggerating at all, personality tests out there.
Yep.
Why Myers-Briggs? Why does this resonate with you? And give us a little bit of a lowdown there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's so many great ones. I mean, there's the Enneagram, there's Strengths Finders, there's what's called the Holland Code, which is used in career counseling. One of the things that I think is great about the Myers-Briggs is it only tries to measure one thing. A lot of these different personality things are trying to measure how good you are at something, aptitude, right? And the Myers-Briggs knows that we cannot tell a test how good we are at something. Otherwise, we would all report that we are all great dancers and all great drivers. And spoiler alert, we're not all great dancers and we're not all great drivers, right? Yes. So the Myers-Briggs is only measuring preferences. Preferences we can measure. And so my inner sort of academic nerd likes it because it's not pretending to try to measure something that we can't really measure, or that would be a lot harder to measure than a quiz, right?
Yeah.
And so preferences, I can tell you about my preferences all day long. And one of the examples I give to people is I hate cauliflower. I cannot stand cauliflower. And I absolutely love coffee. And I do not understand where these preferences came from.
Mm-hmm.
But this much I know. If I were stranded on a desert island and the only source of food was cauliflower, it was like a cauliflower bush or tree or vine, whatever cauliflower comes out of the ground as. You bet your bottom dollar that after 6 months stuck on the island, if I got rescued, I'd be like, do you want to try my 20 different recipes for cauliflower? Right. And that I would have developed an appreciation. And I say that to people because a preference is just a preference. I can operate outside my preference.
Mm-hmm.
Will it be as fun? Will it be as rejuvenating? No. Can I? Yeah. Another example I give people, because people use the Myers-Briggs as like a label, right? Oh, I am an extrovert. I am an introvert.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. You're a person with an extrovert preference or a person with an introvert preference. It's a small distinction, but it's a big distinction. And the part of the way I illustrate that sometimes is I'm right-handed, and I'll be in front of a group of 50 people or 500 people, and I will very, very dramatically get my left hand at a coffee mug and go like this. And for those who are just listening, you can't see, I'm picking up my coffee mug with my left hand, not my right. I'm right-handed. I'll pick it up with my left hand, and I will very just gleefully and dramatically take a sip using my left hand. Right? I'm going to do that right now. Hold on.
Here we go.
And the point is, I'm right-handed. That's my preference. But look, I can do all kinds of amazing things with my left hand. And when I drive a car, I use both. So this demystifies the introverts can only this, extroverts can only that. No, my friend. Introverts might gravitate towards or like or have a preference for. Extroverts might gravitate towards, like, or have a preference for. But that doesn't mean there's no can't in this. This isn't ability. This is just preference. Yeah. And so it's a huge distinction, and it helps us, get better understanding, especially when we have to operate outside of our type, outside of our preference. Can I give you one example?
Yeah.
I had a great colleague named Megan. And by a weird fate set of circumstances, I happened to know her dad, mom, and had met her older brothers. And then, years and years and years later, I hired her. And all the members of her family were very extroverted. And she was the youngest child, the only daughter. And I've sent her to get Myers-Briggs certified. And she came back after the training and like whispered to me, almost like a confession. She goes, "Alan, I think I'm an introvert." And I said, "Megan, I knew that all along, but I'm glad you discovered it." And she had been playing extrovert so that she didn't get lost, right? If you've seen Home Alone, the kid Kevin gets lost. Yes. People forget him. She had to raise her voice more. She had to be more externally processing just to not get lost in the shuffle in a household full of extroverts, right?
Wow.
And it was liberating to her to be able to reconnect with her inner introvert and own it, and it was an amazing thing to watch happen. Yeah.
That's amazing. So how many different types are there?
So there's 4 preferences, and this is the thing about the Myers-Briggs that a lot of people don't understand. It's just 4 psychological preferences. It's where you get your energy, how you soak in the world, how you make decisions, and then your sort of social organizational style. The last one's a little complicated. But the 4 letters, each of those has 2 potential outcomes. So there are 16 types total, 16 types. And so I'll give you a real quick, you want me to give you a real quick on that? So the first letter is extrovert. Introvert, it's very simple. It's where we get our energy. Extroverts go to the outside world. It's other people, but it's also nature or animals or music. Introverts go to the internal world, right? I'm married to an introvert, and when she says best friend, I know that there's an individual person with a street address. I'm an extrovert. When I say best friend, it's this loose category of about 5 to 6 people who are each best in their own way, right?
Yeah.
One of the great things I do is I separate teams into extroverts and introverts, and I say, look across the room, and I ask the extroverts, "Hey, extroverts, how many of you out in public wear earbuds and don't listen to music?" And they look like this. They look at me so confused. They're like, "I don't understand. Wait, you're wearing earbuds or AirPods, but you're not listening to anything in them. This question makes no sense to me." And then I turn to the other side of the room to the wall of introverts. And before I can get the question out, all the hands are slowly going up like, yes, indeed.
Amazing. Yes.
We wear headphones in public. because they are a social barrier, right? Something else I do when I have them separated is I say, because I want to be intersectional about this, right? Because gender is with us, race is with us, these other things are with us. I tell the extroverts, I'm like, extroverts, look across the room. How many people across the room have you ever described as having resting Mitch face? I'm using an M here, Mitch, resting Mitch face. And the extroverts, again, they look at me, they're like, what is that? I'm like, you don't know resting Mitch face? They're like, no. I'm like, I know you don't know it because it doesn't exist. The reason it doesn't exist is because men can be introverted and nobody cares. Nobody cares. Men can just naturally be introverted and no one is trying to ascribe something to them, right? I tell people I've been alive for 50 years. I have never had a stranger say to me, "Oh, honey, you need to smile more." I've never had a stranger say that to me, right?
Yes.
So that's an intersection of my extroversion and my manness, right? That's that I'm an extrovert and a man, right? And so, and then we also slice and dice. I'm like, look across the room if you see women over there who you described resting, what face to.
Yeah.
But then also women of color. If you're looking at white women and saying they're standoffish or shy, with women of color, is it all of a sudden they have an attitude? Like, check yourself a little bit on this, right? So anyway, the first is introvert, extrovert. Questions about that? I know that was layers right there, right?
Yeah. Can you be both? Can you, like, I feel like I'm both. I feel like right now, total extrovert, no problem. Send me somewhere where, I used to run a department at school. Send me somewhere where I have to lead a meeting every friggin' week for 30 years. And I was a complete introvert. I would want to throw up. I would shake. I would cry. I never wanted to answer question. So can I be both?
So here, that's a very common question. And online, people are talking about ambiverts, people who are a little of both. I actually think, and this is all based on the work of Carl Jung and Isabella Briggs Myers, and I've read Isabella Briggs Myers' books and Carl Jung's books. I actually am convinced that in the US that there's no such thing as an ambivert, but there is very much such thing as introverts who have learned to be social to survive in society because society rewards that. One question I typically ask people who are on the fence, they're like, I can't decide because sometimes I'm an introvert, sometimes I'm an extrovert. I say, yeah, okay. And then I say, do you know that little switch you have to turn on sometimes to be social, that switch? And if they nod, I'm like, okay, my friend, extroverts have never heard of this switch. Extroverts have no concept of this switch.
Yeah.
Extroverts, it's not a switch. It's just a live circuit that has electricity through it, flowing through it at all time. Introverts, it's a switch that can turn off and on. So if I even see on their face recognition of the concept of turning on the social switch, I'm like, you're an introvert who, because of work or spouses or society, has become a social introvert. And that's great. It's like speaking a second language.
Yeah.
But you do know what still energizes you and what drains you. You do know what still energizes you and what still drains you. And that's the big deciding point. It's not, again, what you can or can't do. It's the energy. It's are you picking up energy or are you spending energy, right?
Yeah. So this gives me a ton of energy, but it totally does. But at the end of doing 2 or 3 a day, I'm like, I need to turtle. I need zero audio input. I need to put my earbuds in so people stop talking to me in this house for a minute. So I get it, but it gives me energy to do it. 100%. I don't feel like I'm performing. I feel like, oh, this is great. This is fun, blah, blah. Yeah. But yes, at the end of the day, I'm like, I ran 12 miles.
And just for what it's worth, I mean, introverts can get very energized, especially in one-on-one conversations, right? The one-on-one conversations can be very energizing. And that's going to hit some of the other letters that we're going to talk about in just a second too. But for example, last Friday, I legitimately did 6 hours of presentation in front of a city government, the directors of 20 different departments at a city government in Florida. And at the end of those 6 hours, I was bouncing off the wall with energy. So that's extrovert world, right? Where it's not just 3 hours of podcasts one-on-one. It's 6 hours on stage with a PowerPoint in front of people, 6 freaking hours all day long. And then my friend picked me up to take me to the airport, and I'm still like, blah, 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 right? So that's extrovert world for you, right? This is as different as fish and birds, right? Birds need air and fish need water. And when the fish looks at the bird and goes, earth do you do it with all that air? The bird is like, what are you even talking about, my friend? How do you even do it with all that water, right? Like it's, yeah.
Yeah.
So something else, and this is, I think that you'll appreciate this too. The second letter, so the first letter is extrovert, introvert, which is just our energy. Where do we get our energy?
Mm-hmm.
The second letter is sensing and intuition. And so Jung and Isabella Briggs Myers think that we break down into two different categories as far as the way we absorb the world around us.
Yeah.
The sensing people, and for those in your who listen to your podcast who were born before the year 1975, they may know the reference of Joe Friday, just the facts, ma'am, right? Just the facts. For those born after 1985, you've probably worked with computers where if you did not give computers the right kind of input, the right kind of search term, whatever, it doesn't compute.
Mm-hmm.
The sensing preference is very much like that. It's the Joe Friday, just give me the facts. It's the computer, give this to me in a linear way.
Mm-hmm.
It's people who prefer an outline. It's people who, when they get their furniture from IKEA or Target, they actually stop and read the instructions first.
Oh.
That's sensing. Yeah. Oh, I already know, friend. I already know you're not sensing.
Nope.
Yep. I can tell by the decor on your bookcase behind you that you're intuitive. Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%.
Okay.
So sensing and intuitive. Sensing is a literal absorption of the world. Now, not everybody can see, not everybody can hear, but for those who are sighted and hearing, it's when you look. I actually, in my trainings, I show a picture, and the picture is these two kids sitting on a rhino, and there are all these stones with patterns on them. There's a woman behind a rock. And sensing people will describe it just like I just described it. They will say there were two children on a rhino. There were 3 blackbirds, 1 bluebird. There's a woman behind a rock. They're using words that are colors, numbers, positions to describe the literal picture in front of them. The intuitive folks, when I show them that picture, they're like, oh, it's children on a journey. They're traveling through a graveyard, right? They're like, it's in Ireland, or I think there's a hobbit in that little hut behind. They're reading into the picture, right? They're interpreting as they absorb. Sensing people don't interpret as they absorb; they just absorb the facts, and then intuitive people interpret as the absorption happens. Everything is a story that has to be integrated with the other stories. So, hello, I know you're an intuitive. I can tell. Yeah. Does that make some sense?
It does, and it feels very synonymous with empath.
Very much so.
Okay.
Very much so.
That
and
makes
there's even
so much sense.
There's even this thing, and in the course I go into this. I think it would be a little lengthy to get into here, but where, as I tell you about the 2 middle letters, intuition and sensing is one, and then the next one I'm about to discuss. One of those is our dominant, and one's our subdominant. And there's a fascinating psychological thing about that too. And so, like, I'm an intuitive, but I'm also a dominant intuitive. And so there's a lot that I can read from people. Now too, sometimes it gets me in trouble because sometimes my assumptions are off, right? But over time, as I've aged, I've gotten better and better at sidestepping that. But so one other example I give people is I'm like, hey, so, I live in North Carolina. I'm like, if I ever needed to like invade Tennessee, and I'm a Quaker, so I like war metaphors are not my jam. But if I had a sensing person and an intuitive person, and I needed to go scout a battlefield, I'm going to send my sensing person. And so I describe it. I say, so we send the sensing person, and they come back, and there's a guard on the north tower. There's a guard on the south tower. There are 3 tanks in the middle. There's this razor wire. There's this many munitions. And they're listing it. As an intuitive, if I was in charge of scouting a battlefield, here's what my report would be. I'd come back to the general and be like, so there was a guard on the north tower. His uniform reminded me of that guy in Saving Private Ryan. Did you see Saving Private Ryan? Oh my gosh. And I love the soundtrack to Saving Private Ryan. That's like when I go to bed sometimes, I listen to that soundtrack. You know what the general's thinking? We're going to die. Yeah. We're going to die. Right. Yeah. So that's sensing versus intuitive. But here's the flip side. If that same general said, we have to break down camp, we have to move in 1 minute, we need to leave this tent in 1 minute, and they have their sensing person and their intuitive person, and they say, look, I have 20 maps of enemy troop movements, 20 maps here on the wall of the tent. You only have 1 minute. And in 1 minute, I need you to find the pattern. I need you to find the pattern so we'll know where they're going next. The sensing person that was so great at scouting a literal battlefield, they're going to struggle. Yeah. They're going to struggle mightily. And the intuitive person is going to be like 1 minute pattern, 20 maps, got it. Okay, hold on. And they'll zoom out in a way, and they'll be like, oh, let's move this one over here. Yup. Okay, clearly they're going to Knoxville, right?
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so the intuitive is the person who reads patterns as they absorb the world. And so the picture that I show people literally has these gravestones with these stones with markings. Sensing people will describe them as stones with markings. Intuitive people will describe them as gravestones. And literally they are reading what's beneath the picture. They're literally telling you there's something there that you can't see, right? That's intuitive, right? So that's the second letter. So extrovert, introvert, sensing, intuitive. And the reason too that you can get jazzed by a podcast thing as an introvert is because intuition is part of it too, right? That if you were sensing, this probably wouldn't jazz you. If you were introvert and sensing, this wouldn't jazz you up the same way. So it's more than just our extrovert introvert. It's introvert that's trying to find meaningful connection. Intuitives are always about meaningful connection, right? So far, so good.
Yeah, and explains to me why. And every time I have a host, I, do the research and I get prepared and I have the questions. I literally never ask the question because I wait for the intuition and the energy, and I don't. Totally makes sense.
It's a flow thing. It's awesome.
Yeah.
The third letter is thinking and feeling. And so again, the first letter is how we get our energy, extrovert, introvert. The second letter is how we absorb the world around us, sensing, which is the literal absorbing, intuition, which is the metaphorical or the connected observing. But then the third letter is we're done observing. Now we have to make decisions about life, decisions about what I'm going to have for dinner tonight, decisions about, my teen is making a decision about where he or they is going to college, making decisions about career stuff, about relationship stuff. And Jung thinks we break down into two camps, the thinkers and the feelers. The T for thinking and F for feeling. Now, this is something that's interesting. In the United States, 65% of men score thinking. And in the United States, 65% of women score feeling. But I want to disrupt this a little bit because in Africa, when people take the Myers-Briggs, it's 50-50. In Europe, it's 50-50.
Interesting.
In South America, there is this gender thing, but not nearly as pronounced. And what that is telling me is that there is a societal thing in North America where men are taught to be logical first, and women are taught to be person-centered first. And so it's just good information for your listeners to have that these are archetypes, but our societal norms, our family norms can push us one way or another. And rediscovering who we are deep down can be very powerful, right? One example I give people is, I don't know if you've ever heard, seen the musical Les Mis, or read the book, right?
It's my favorite, actually.
So for your listeners who don't know, there's going to be spoilers, and it's based on the novel by, is it Victor Hugo, right? Yeah. I can always ask the introvert who the author is, because so based on the novel by Victor Hugo, and so if your listeners have not seen Les Mis, then there are spoilers ahead. So just get ready. There's spoilers. The premise is that Jean Valjean is the protagonist, and he, I think, is meant to be the hero of the story. But Cheryl, do you want to tell people what his original transgression is that lands him in jail? You remember he steals
steals bread?
He steals a loaf of bread. Yeah. So he steals a loaf of bread to feed a starving family.
Yes.
And then he escapes prison, and there's this really uptight prison guard or cop named Javert who makes it his life mission to hunt down Jean Valjean, this hardened criminal who stole a loaf of bread. And so within this, there's a lot of great metaphor for understanding thinking versus feeling, right? If I were at my house and Jean Valjean came to the door and he's trying to escape the cops, do I let him in? Or do I call 911? Is he really the hero of the story, or is he the villain? Now, the people who wrote the musical are counting on us to believe that he's the hero because there's a bigger thing. It was a starving family. That's feeling. A starving family, person-centered, that is bigger than one loaf of bread from a bakery and the principle that it is illegal, that it is not legal, right?
Yeah.
That I am breaking the law, which is the realm of the thinking and logical folks. for a bigger, better thing, which is helping a person, right?
Yeah.
And so as we make decisions, and now granted, remember my driving a car metaphor, we use two hands,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But subconsciously, we either lead with feeling or lead with thinking. And Cheryl, I'm going to guess that you have a preference for feeling. Can I guess that? Yep.
Bingo.
Yep.
I would have given him more bread.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, come on in. Should we knock over a few convenience stores and get more food while we're at it? Right? Like, yep. And so intuition and sensing is how we absorb the world, but thinking and feeling is how we make decisions about the world. And it's interesting because Isabella Briggs Myers was pretty active as a feminist, and one thing she warned against was the notion that feeling is emotional. She wanted to debunk that. It's not emotional, because that gets a bad rap, right? Like all of a sudden it's like I'm watching a Lifetime movie and somebody's judging me for it, right? Or whatever, right? Yeah. Instead, it's being person-centered in your decision making as opposed to principle-centered. And again, my decisions involve people and principles. But as a feeler, I go people first, principles next. Thinkers go principles first, people next. And that's I don't know if you've heard, but in the United States, we have two different political parties, each of which proposes solutions to different issues. Spoilers, one of them is dominated by people with feeling preferences and one's dominated by people with thinking preferences, right? And so there, I mean, there's all kinds of, we can get into that mess. But anyway, that's the third letter. Do you have questions about that? I know I'm doing a lot of talking, but.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I'm thinking, as you're talking about thinking and feeling, my brain, like with teaching teenagers, is like, there's my black and white thinkers and there's my gray area.
Yep.
And it's funny because I spent so many years in spec ed where I would battle with the black and white thinking teachers, and sorry to like put them in a lump, but math and science.
Yep.
And right. And not understand that I use like spec ed is all gray. It's all gray because even though some of the kids are black and white thinkers in special education, a gray area because we always have to be thinking outside the box. We always have to shift a perspective. And I think that's kind of where I'm thinking. As you were talking about that, I'm thinking, black and white and gray.
Yep. And what's interesting is with those two middle letters, the thing that's so fascinating is intuition versus sensing. Intuition is the squishier one and sensing is the firmer one. Thinking and feeling is the squishier one and thinking is the firmer one. I love it though, because some people have one of each. Some people absorb the world as an intuitive, but they'll process like a thinker. Or they'll absorb the world as sensing, give me just the facts, but they process the world as a feeler. And so those folks can be such the glue people in our organizations and the glue people in our families, the people who might absorb the world in a more concrete way and then process it more squishy, or absorb it more squishy and process it more concretely. For those of us who are absorbing and processing in a squishy way, or on the other hand, absorbing and processing in a very concrete way. And so it's really neat, the combinations that we can have, right?
Yeah, because those would be the leaders who would connect with everybody.
Oh my gosh. You've got to have those combinations. You've got to have those combinations. And then the last letter is judging and perceiving. And this one's a little complicated to understand in Jungian terms, but the shorthand is, how messy is your work area? That's the shorthand. Or what is your relationship with your day planner? Right. So in other words, J people are known to have a strong preference for closure. So my wife's a J. When she has a to-do list, if there's something that she did that was not on her to-do list that should have been, she will, after doing it, she'll retroactively go put it on the to-do list so she can have the joy of marking it back off. Right.
Okay.
That is distinctly J behavior. Right. And so when I say a relationship with your to-do list, there's an emotional connection to lists in a way, whereas perceivers are much more, perceivers have to-do lists, but it's just a tool that I've got in my toolbox. I have no emotional connection to it. I do it so I can survive and be functional as an adult.
Yes.
It's not something that I have a relationship with like the J people.
Yeah.
So Cheryl, INFP, do you think your type is introvert, intuitive,
Yeah.
Feeling, perceiving.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the to-do list for me is like journaling. It just feels good to write down what I'm going to do. And you can damn well bet it's going to go in the next day and the next day and the next day, because I don't get anything done. It feels good to write it down.
Yes. And it's interesting because intuitive feelers, NFs, who happen to also be Ps at the end, tend to really enjoy the creative process of creating a new organizational system that they secretly know they're not going to maintain.
Bingo.
Right. And so
you
it's
just outed me completely.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
So sorry. I'm going to make this really cool color-coded guidebook, whatever. I'm sure. So I do travel agent stuff on the side, and I took so much pride. I laser etched like this organizer, and it's got tabs with the letters and everything, and it's got the logo and whatever. Do I use it? Right. I mean, I do, but the joy was putting it together. The joy is not maintaining it. Right.
Yeah.
And so then the J folks tend to be more closure oriented. They tend to be more organized. And so we need both of these folks, because when you're a J and you have an event planned and something doesn't go according to plan, you kind of freak out.
Yeah.
And that's when the P people can be like, hey, friends, don't worry. We got it. We got options on options on options.
Yes.
I used to have staff. We used to do like large scale event planning. We planned dances and concerts at this university. And I would always hire staff that had J for their last letter. I didn't make them take the test, but I just knew they were J. And because I have a P, and I knew I would need them. So when we're planning, they are much more detail oriented. And not only are they J, but I would hire people, if you remember back to the sensing intuition, the literal absorbers. I would hire a lot of people who were literal absorbers who were J's, right? That was the people I needed.
Yeah.
The third letter, I don't care. Thinking and feeling, we can work around that. But the how do you absorb are you absorbing the world in a linear way? Because Alan is sure as heck not. And are you organized about it? Because again, I'm not. So we're planning the event, and they are detail. They're keeping me grounded.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. Then we get to the day of the event. The poster says concert starts at 9, or the dance starts at 9. It's 8:50, and the DJ has not arrived yet. My staff is freaking out because that's not according to the plan.
Yeah.
Me as the perceiver, as the intuitive feeling perceiver, I'm like, look, y'all, look. The poster says that the dance starts at 9 o'clock. Except for 2 first-year students, the dance doesn't really start. The party doesn't start till about midnight. I mean, it does on paper, it does, but don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And then 2, I've got a key to the DJ booth. 2 of the students from the committee have like their iPods with them. We can play some music for the next 30 minutes, and it's going to be fine.
Yes.
So that improvisational, when things don't go well, skill and aptitude and preference is opposite the organized preference, right? But to make the world work, you need them both, right?
Yeah. Okay. Oh my gosh. I feel like I could talk like this for about 8 hours. Let's try and zone in for a minute on, because we're going to send everybody to your Myers-Briggs. But let's zone in on, okay, I'm in my house and I have 4 different types. Mom is one. Parent is one. The other parent's the other. I got 2 kids or something else. What are we doing? Are we clashing? What are we doing?
Oh my gosh, so much conflict. And so to me, the goal is always to meet in the middle and to be intentional about it. I mentioned my colleague, Megan, who had to play extrovert for all of her young adolescence just so she wouldn't get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
What if her family had talked about type? What if they had been like, introverts are awesome, extroverts are awesome, they're just awesome differently. And if you're an introvert, what if there had been that conversation? So I'll give you an example. My older son's an extrovert and my younger son's an introvert. When I pick up my younger son from school, he does not want to talk about his day. He just does not. My older son, when I would pick him up from school, it would be like a transcript of everything that happened academically, socially, extracurricularly. I would get the full CNN report on his day, right? And so now the interesting thing is I'm an extrovert, but I work out of my home. So I'm by myself at home, craving human contact.
Yeah.
My wife, who works at a school, is an introvert. My younger son, who's still in the home, goes to school. He's an introvert. They get home. They need quiet. And I need to talk to them. Conflict.
Uh-oh.
Right. So what we do is we do a series of compromises. We do compromises where I pick my son up and I say, Charlie, I'm just going to ask you one question, which is, how was your day? I don't want any detail, but later I would love to hear some detail when you've rejuvenated. That's what I say, because I'm aware that he's an introvert. I'm aware he needs some time to process.
Yeah.
And I put my extroversion on pause, but I don't entirely pause it, because I do say, and I've told him that. So I'm like, Charlie, I am going to do at least a check-in, and I just want you to give me my day was good, or it was rough, or it was, we're going to meet halfway, where I want the whole report. I'm just going to do a little check-in, so you meet me halfway, and then we'll drive the rest of the way home in silence. And after you've gotten home, had your snack, watched your YouTube, then you can talk to me about what you remember from your day, if it's important, right?
Oh, how about teaching kids to be self-aware? That's the best. I love that.
It's huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
Something else that's interesting, and this can be helpful for parents and kids, is that when I have extroverts and introverts together, I separate them, and then I ask them to sit in silence. And if you take my course, this is going to be a little bit of a spoiler, but you sit in silence. And when I'm doing this with groups, I sit in silence for about 90 seconds. And then I ask the introverts and the extroverts, how long were we in silence? And I give them multiple choice. I'm like, was it 60 seconds, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, or 2.5 minutes? The introverts nail it. They know it was 90 seconds, because introverts did not feel uncomfortable. 90 seconds is 90 seconds, whatever. The extroverts will swear it out. Oh, that was at least 2 minutes, maybe 2.5. Are you tricking us? Was that really 3 minutes? And meanwhile, if you're observing them in the room, the extroverts are fidgeting. They're communicating non-verbally. Like they don't deal with silence well.
Yeah.
And they overinterpret how long silence is. Similarly, when I'm with my 15-year-old in the grocery store, and as an extrovert, I see somebody who has a shirt from a university where I used to work or something, and I strike up a conversation. Yeah. My son, as an introvert, feels like that conversation has gone on for 10 to 15 minutes. In real life, it's been about 2. But his perception of how long this is going is skewed because he's an introvert and I'm an extrovert, right? So the way we perceive time is even different.
Yeah.
And so having that awareness of public speaking to an introvert, time will move at a certain clip. Public speaking to an extrovert, time will move differently. Silence for an extrovert, silence for an introvert. And so building that understanding is huge. It's huge. Yeah. And so it's better to be aware and to meet in the middle than it is to not be aware. Before I was aware, the first 3, and Cheryl, you might identify this. The first 3 years of my marriage, I kept asking my wife, are you okay? Are you mad? What's wrong? Is something wrong? Are you mad? Are you okay? Okay. To extroverts, silence means there's a problem.
Yeah.
To introverts, silence is just every day. It's water to the fish.
Nice. Yeah.
It's just how it is.
Yeah.
And so I had to understand. And so I tell extroverts and introverts. And so your listeners can benefit from this. I'm like, extroverts who are in relationships with introverts, stop bugging them so much. If they're upset, they'll tell you. That's number 1.
Yes.
But now introverts, hey, you know how sometimes you think those internal thoughts about how much you appreciate, love, like someone in your life? Say it out loud more than you think you need to if you know they are extroverts. Right? Just if you think saying it once a month is cool, try 5 times a month. Just see what happens. If it's true to you, whatever that thing is. Same with job interviews. I tell people, I'm like, extroverts, you do not need to tell the person interviewing you that you're excited about the job. You don't need to tell them, because they'll know or they won't. Introverts, be yourself. Don't act extrovert. Don't be like, hey, I'm so excited. No, don't be that person. Yeah. But if you're an introvert at a job interview, at least one time in the interview, just say, hey, I wanted to let you know that I'm excited about this job. Most introverts assume that people will ask if they want to know, but I'm like, it's sort of your responsibility to let them know.
Yeah.
And so,
I feel like it's cushioning if you don't know who you're dealing with.
Yeah.
You're kind of going, okay.
Yeah.
Like it's something everybody should know.
Yep.
Even if someone else across the table doesn't know, at least it's it's in the forefront. Okay. Maybe he's not pissed off at me. Maybe even if it's a complete stranger.
Yes.
It's good information.
And then when speaking
Oh.
to people, keep in mind the second letter, if you remember, is how people absorb, the sensing and the intuitive. Every audience I speak to, everyone listening to this podcast right now, half of them are sensing and want to hear some details. The other half are intuitive and want to know how this applies to their life.
Yeah.
And so when I'm doing a presentation to like a board of trustees, I give the sensing crowd charts and graphs with numbers.
Yeah.
And then I follow it up with a story about this chart is talking about how we help first generation college students be successful through their sophomore year through this program. Now I'm going to tell you about Samantha and Samantha's story. That's the intuitive part, right?
Yeah.
Where I'm going to tell that story. So if you're talking to kids, right, say you don't know if your kid is sensing or intuitive, you can say, these are the rules, sensing, and then peel back the curtain on the intuition and be like, here is how I arrived at creating these rules, and here's the context of why these rules are important.
Yes.
So you're meeting them both places. You're meeting them both places. Now, granted, if you can get your kid to take the Myers-Briggs, and by the way, if people are curious, there's a great, and if you take my course, I point to this website called humanmetrics.com, which has a great free version.
Mm-hmm.
I will say though that just from an ethics standpoint, most typically the Myers-Briggs and Jungian typology tests are recommended for people with a 10th grade vocabulary or higher.
Okay.
Right. So there is a little bit of ableism baked into the cake, sadly. But people with a roughly 10th grade vocabulary should be able to take it and get a pretty accurate type. But yeah, it's powerful. It's so powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if I have to say, first of all, you know, parents get like overloaded with shit to do to make their relationships better. Yes. But there's times when we need to front end load. There we go. And take the weight off later. Like this is like filling your tank with the best gas, because if you're going to go farther, it's going to be a better drive. I love it. And listen, teachers, hello, you have all of these people in your classroom.
Correct.
Oh my gosh.
Correct.
This is so good. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to ask a question.
Okay.
Is there a specific type that would struggle way more as a teen than others?
That's a great question. I think that mostly it comes down to your environment. In other words, if you have a parent that's 100% opposite and you're not talking type, it's going to be tough no matter what your type, right? So there, I don't think that there's a specific type that struggles more. Just like people ask about different types and different careers. But I will say that I will tell you this much: those middle two letters. So extrovert, introvert. Most of us can tell. Most of us don't have to take the Myers-Briggs to tell that about each other, right? Yeah. We can usually pick that up. The last letter, judging and perceiving, all you gotta do is walk past somebody's desk. And if I showed you my desk right now, you'd be like, yeah, he's a perceiver, because literally there's a paint roller here and a laser etched wooden sign and my passport.
Caesar Rimmer for my Caesar.
And like hand sanitizer and like the most random assortment of stuff that if I were a judger would not be on my desk.
Yes.
So that first letter and that last letter, we can usually tell about our colleagues, our kids, our spouses. We can usually tell. But those middle two letters are the process letters. Those are harder to tell. And those are the ones where most arguments show up. In other words, think about the sensing and the intuitive and we sent 2 scouts to the battlefield. And now they're arguing about what they saw. Yeah. Because one person saw things in a literal way, but doesn't necessarily yet know how those things connect to each other. The other one only absorbed the things as they connected, but forgot some of the details.
Yeah.
Hence arguments, right? Or families discussing how they're going to use money for this, a family vacation, or invest in this. When we get to the third letter, the thinking, feeling, principles versus people. Our older kid in college in New York, going to college in New York is expensive. So financially, we're a little behind in this season of our life. This past fall, my wife went up to visit once, and I went up to visit once. Could we technically afford that? No. But could we afford not to go for the one time our kid is in college in New York? No. So notice I asked a principled question, and then I asked a person-centered question. The principled question is, can we technically afford it via our bank account? The answer is no. We're going into some debt. But the person-centered question is, can we afford to miss this 4-year window of our kid going to college in New York and getting up there for a visit? No, we can't afford that in an emotional, person-centered sense, even though we can't afford this in the financial, literal sense, right? And so that's what we all make those decisions. And understanding your Myers-Briggs type means you understand a little bit about how your psyche is operating through those decisions. And it's so much better to diffuse arguments, to build better understanding, build empathy. And there's one more thing I want to mention too, because I know we're getting low on time.
It's okay.
there's even more in the 4 letters, where if I told you INFP is your type, where I can INFP, so P points to perceiving. So your intuition, Cheryl, if INFP is your accurate type, your intuition is how people know you. That is your public face.
Yeah.
But your inner circle knows the feeling you, knows the feeling, person-centered decision maker you. And that's actually your Jungian dominant. That's what your dominant is, would be feeling, right? And so you have a dominant, and then you have your number 2 is your subdominant. And then you've got this thing, and this language is a little ableist, but it's a metaphor. It's called your blind spot. And your blind spot's logic. My blind spot is sensing, just so you know. And so what that means, and this is just a teaser for those who are more interested about learning about your blind spot. When you are under stress, Cheryl, I bet when you're under stress, you have a 5-year-old version of Cheryl that thinks that she's making very logical decisions, but is making them like a juvenile throwing a temper tantrum.
Bingo.
That's get a high five. Yep.
Bingo.
Yep,
Oh yeah.
yep,
You got it.
My blind spot is sensing. Remember, sensing, when it's someone's type, they can go to a battlefield and see all the details.
Yeah.
When I'm under stress, 5-year-old Alan shows up and will fixate on one detail of something a boss said 10 years ago and go deep into the rabbit hole. That's the flavor of my blind spot. And so I go through techniques on how do you use your type to get out from your blind spot, to get out from that. And so it can help you manage stress. There's so many really great tools that people don't even understand. People, a lot of times, they'll take the quiz, they'll read what famous people have their type, and then they just call it a day, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot more depth to it and a lot more use for it. Yeah.
And I want to caution, talk to me. I know we're running out of time. I just want let's talk about, hey, I want my kid to take this test.
Yes. Yep.
Caution, helping them take the test.
Yeah. So the key about taking the test is you're supposed to imagine what people call in the Myers-Briggs industry, your shoes off self. So what I mean by that is I'm a dad. I'm an owner of a company. I'm a spouse. These are all roles I play. I'm a white guy, so I'm not also playing the role of representing women in my workplace or representing Black people. There's a lot of layers that I don't have to deal with that women, people of color, etc., have to deal with on top of this.
Yeah.
Your shoes off self is I'm imagining myself retired. I'm imagining myself when I don't have responsibilities or roles to play anymore. And that is hard. That's hard. I can't really unprogram parenting from me. I can't really unprogram spouse from me, but I try. So before taking the instrument, try to imagine yourself in your happy place. Try to imagine yourself. For grown-ups, I say if you're fine with wine, have a glass of wine, sit in a picturesque place, meditate, pray, whatever it is you do to center yourself, and then take the Myers-Briggs. To me, when I take it, I imagine I'm sitting at Epcot down at Disney. I've got my double espresso. It's a beautiful day. Nobody needs anything from me. A client's not calling me up to work on a contract. A kid is not asking me for. I've got no responsibilities, and then I take it. And the reason that's important is because our lives show up in the test. So I'm an ENFP, extrovert, intuitive, feeling, perceiver. So you and I share a lot of common ground, except where we get our energy. And I used to be a banker. I was a loan officer. I know, right? Terrifying. And I would frequently go to my boss, and I'd say, look, man, she's a single mom. Her car is broken down, but she has a job interview next week, but she needs to get her car fixed so she can get to the job interview. So she needs a $600 loan. Can we get her a loan? That's a feeling argument.
Yeah.
My boss would say, what's her credit score? What's her debt to income ratio? He would say thinking arguments. Now he was smart. He knew I was a feeler, and I think he may have taken the Myers-Briggs or class. Then he would say to me, Alan, look, this is the credit union. if we give her a loan and she can't pay it back, that affects all of our members. And that includes school teachers and Department of Transportation workers. And I'm like, he gave me the thinking, but then he followed it up with a feeling.
Yes.
That's good leadership. And so I think what were we just talking about? Oh, so after I was a banker, I took the Myers-Briggs and I scored thinking because it had been drilled into me. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Is thinking who I am? No. And this is why I'm offering this interpretation. This is why I offer the coaching, because you can take the instrument and your responsibilities in your life may creep into it. And you might not get to your shoes off self that you need to get to find your type, which is why I got certified, because I can help you go through kind of this conversation you and I just had and your results and compare them to each other. So it's why it's important to have someone who's certified that can help you along the journey, because the test may guess the you that's you, or it may pick up work you or parent you, or you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think that's really valuable to say, if the kids are going to take the test, take them with you, because your parenting could just skew. Oh, my mom won't be happy if I say this. My dad won't be happy if I say this, or whatever. Like it's maybe that's where the grade 10 vocabulary comes in, because then they can take their own test. But who better than to coach through it? So there's no skew of outside environment.
And that's the thing is, for kids, getting to your shoes off self oftentimes is pretty easy, because a lot of the roles that we carry as adults, they're still developing those roles, right? So a lot of kids, probably don't lie awake at night thinking about finance. Some do, depending on your privilege level, right? But I mean, it's a different thing. It's a different thing. And so parents, if you do get your kids to take this, just tell them there's no right or wrong answers. There's no right way to do this or wrong way to do this. There's no good personality or bad personality. Just be the most honest with it you can. And that's their version of shoes off self. For parents, I'm like, imagine yourself at Epcot or on the beach or whatever it is that, for me, it's espresso. For some people, it's a glass of wine. For whatever, meditation, something to get yourself so that you can, for a split second, shed the roles that we all play every day.
And if you choose the intuition, we know the meditation, we know where you're going.
We know you're going to be exactly. And it's so funny because these days I can suss out people's type typically through just a conversation, right? Because I've been working with this for 20 something years. So
Oh, you have made this so much fun. Like I wanted to go down all these paths about, specifically kids, specifically parenting. You know what? You make this fun. You make this manageable. You make this so, like, you just got to go see Dr. Mueller and get this Myers-Briggs done and start implementing, because like I said, it's another thing on your to-do list. I get it. But you're front end loading. Like we've got to, if you're struggling at home, there is an answer.
There are, and the great thing is that the course that I offer goes in depth on the blind spot part. I don't know an adult human who's not experiencing stress. I don't know one. I haven't met one yet. And so the question is there a real Jungian psychological way to deal with stress? Yes, there is. And can I help break it down without having to read Jung in the original German? Yes, I can. Right? I can break it down in just everyday terms. Here's the legit strategy on when I'm in my blind spot. Here there are literally 2 questions that I ask myself, right? And Cheryl, there's 2 questions I could give you that are these powerful questions when you're operating from your blind spot that help you manage stress. And so, if you've got a spouse or partner or a kid or coworkers, whatever, it can be really powerful. And so my course gets a lot more in depth on that, because that's harder work. It's called blind spot for a reason. It's hard to perceive in ourselves, right? And people who are on self-awareness journeys, like you had pretty quick recognition of when I said, your blind spot is there's probably a 5-year-old Cheryl that defaults to 5-year-old logic when you're under stress. But not everyone is necessarily reflective or has the time or energy to go on that journey. And so for some people, it's a little harder to find, and I can help them find it too, which is, it's tricky, but it can be so empowering.
It sounds, I got goosebumps. I think it's so good. Okay. So aside from where we can find you, what's one step parents can do right now?
One step is, you probably know, parents, if you are an extrovert or an introvert, and if your kids are an introvert or an extrovert, and have that conversation. Just be like, hey, so do you get your energy more from, and you probably already know, but have the conversation. Be like, hey, so do you get more energized from talking to lots of people, or do you get more energized from like your internal thoughts and your internal world? Let's have that conversation. And now as a parent, I'm going to tell you how I get energized. And maybe sometimes I want to talk a lot and you don't, or you want to talk a lot and I don't. And now we understand. Now we understand. And so let's just make a pact. Let's meet in the middle. Like if you know I'm an introvert, and I don't want to talk that much, but I know you're an extrovert and I care about you, and I know that part of how you might feel cared for is by hearing my stories as an introvert. Like, and this is a thing. Let's meet in the middle, friend, where I'll curate some stories to give them to you when I've got good energy.
Yeah.
And then extrovert, when you've got good energy, learn that being quiet is okay too.
Yeah.
Learn yeah.
Whole new level of eliminating shame based on who we are.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, mic drop.
Society.
The whole thing was a mic drop.
Society celebrates extroverts and society shames introverts.
Yes.
You got my thing about resting Mitch face, right? Like, and it shames women introverts worse, and women of color introverts even worse, right? And so just debunking that. And then also, gosh, because I'm also a leadership consultant, and the idea that extroversion and leadership have anything to do with each other, they don't. They don't. Some of the best leaders that I've loved following are introverts. And do they get as much recognition, get as much press time? Maybe, maybe not. But once you understand that this is just about where we get our energy, gosh, it opens up a whole new world. It opens up a whole new world. Yeah.
And do they need it?
And do they need, what do you mean, do they need it? Do they need the energy?
Does an introvert need all the accolades and all the recognition?
No. It's hilarious. And anybody who's listening, who's been in a work setting, I'm going to tell you something that happens over and over and over again. Somebody will the boss will throw out a question. Three different extroverts will speak before the introvert has even formed their answer. Because the introvert is thinking through the question, thinking through the rough draft of the answer, then thinking through how they would say it, then they're ready to say it. But by that point, 3 extroverts have already said the same thing. Here's the difference, though. Here's the fascinating thing. Most introverts are cool with that. They're like, yep, somebody said it. The information is in the room. That's enough. The extrovert 1 says it. Extrovert 2 says almost the same thing. Extrovert 3 says almost the exact same thing. The introvert's going, why are y'all repeating each other? Yeah. Because extroverts, it's not good enough that it's in the room. They want to be seen as being on the record, being witnessed. They want people to bear witness to their opinion, which is valuable.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they also slow the meeting down by repeating the same thing over and over again. And so I tell people, I don't know if anybody ever saw the movie Ghost, but say ditto, right? Yeah. Or, down in the South, we got Baptists, amen. Quakers, we say, friend speaks my mind, right? Just, you don't have to repeat the whole thing. Just be like, yep, what he said, what she said. Yep, I agree. Yep. Friend speaks my mind. High five. Yep. And so that gets you on. That's a great way for extroverts to compromise, is you get on the record. People know that you were thinking that too, because that's important to us. That's important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meanwhile, it's annoying to introverts often. And then I tell the introverts, I'm like, introverts, that rough draft you went through? There are people in the room who want to know about that rough draft. That rough draft might have nuggets in it that you're refined, that the refined version you're ready to say doesn't have. That's going to move this project or this initiative forward. That rough draft has value. And so don't be who you're not. Don't be an extrovert. But every once in a while, throw your rough draft out and see what happens. And when you've got good energy, when you're having a good day, do a little experiment and throw the rough draft out and see what happens. I bet people are going to like it. Yeah.
That's so good, because as an introvert, generating those answers takes so much.
Yeah.
And then someone else blurts it out, and not only do I not care, I'm like, oh, thank God, I don't have to.
Yep.
I'm cool with that. Good.
Yep.
Love it. Oh my God.
Every syllabus I ever saw, when I saw class participation, 20 points, every extrovert in the room goes, yeah, all right, free points. Every introvert in the room goes, oh no, how much talking am I going to have to do to get those 20 points? Right. And so it's a real thing, right? This is a real life thing. And so you've got to, once you start understanding it, though, you can build environments this way. And when I do presentations, sometimes I say, okay, here's a concept. We're going to have a group discussion. Other times I hand out note cards first. And I say, here's a question. Jot down your thoughts on the note card. Then we're going to have a group discussion. The note cards aren't for the extroverts. The note cards are a way for me to stall and give introverts the time that they need to do that deliberate, awesome thinking that they do and put it on paper, which will also build their confidence, et cetera, right? And so those classroom techniques, if you're a teacher and you're listening and you're teaching teens, do this. Because the class participation thing, you should have introvert-friendly and extrovert-friendly class participation stuff. You don't want to just cater to the introverts or just cater. Everybody caters to the extroverts pretty much. You want to cater to them and then push them, and then cater to them and then push them.
Yes.
So introverts, we're going to do a small group activity, but I want to let you know afterwards there's going to be a large group activity. So get ready, right?
Love it.
So meet them where they are and then stretch them a little. Yeah.
Oh, so good. Oh, Dr. Mueller, this has been amazing. I feel like we could have like 10 more episodes. Okay. Where can we find you? How can we work with you? What are all the goodies? Tell us all the good things.
So adaptivechallengeconsulting.com is the best place to find me. You can also find Adaptive Challenge Consulting on LinkedIn. We're doing a bunch of free webinars. The third one's coming up, but probably by the time this airs, it will be done. But we're doing more and more webinars coming up. The last 3 we did were all on emotional intelligence. One was on emotional intelligence and managing up and managing down. One was on emotional intelligence and Myers-Briggs type. And the one that I've got coming up next week is emotional intelligence and intersecting identities. So we're going to get real on the identities that we bring. But after that series of 3, I'm going to do another series of 3. So those are some free webinars. And then my class, I'm doing a little special right now. My class is through Teachable, and it's about 5 to 6 hours self-paced. So very, very introvert friendly, wink, wink. And people can take the course, but there's a coupon right now called free coaching, because the next 25 people who use that coupon, after they've completed the course, I'm going to do a free 1-hour coaching session with them.
Wow.
And so the 1-hour coaching session, it can be 2 people together. So it could be, spouses, parent, kid, coworkers, whatever. But it's great when 2 people can sit down and seek to understand each other better. Younger couples who are debating, maybe should we get married, kind of thing, right? And I'm like, people always ask what types are the most compatible. I'm like, any type can be compatible, but the more different you are, the more you better be talking type.
Yeah.
Right. The more same you are, you can get away with not talking type so much. But the difference is where arguments will happen over the lifetime. And I've been married almost 28 years now, right? The differences show up in the Myers-Briggs stuff. And if you can talk type more on the front end, it's going to lead to so much more ability to communicate later, Oh,
yeah. So good. So good. Well, we're going to put everything in the show notes.
Awesome.
Thank you. I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for the work you do, and I'm grateful for our conversation and your energy. This was so fun. I'm pretty sure you might be a returning guest. That would be great. Again, thank you for listening. Teen Minds Redefined. Share, subscribe, follow, all the things. Get this into everybody's ears, because everybody needs to hear this stuff. Thank you.